Hello and welcome to another video of my non-dual teachings. Today I'm going to talk about the very controversial and confusing topic of the ego. So I am going to give a little introduction, as usual for me, as to why this is so confusing. Why are you always finding different approaches and definitions about the ego and everything else related to the ego? If you should have ego death, people shouldn't have an ego is the problem, ego is your friend, all of this. The thing with most of these teachings is that we are trying to depart from the academic approach to studying things, to learning things. Just like, you see, the best way I can describe it is that the ego belongs to that department of, say, love or a feeling. Love you can't describe. You can't find one definition for love and say, oh yes, that's the definition for love. Love is something that is felt and it is just ineffable. That is the nature of all mysticism. Mysticism is ineffable. And so you will always find that people are going to devise different ways to describe the same thing. Just like we describe love in different ways, but we're talking about the same feeling. So because of that, there's a lot of confusion. And because of that, I'm just going to give you my approach, which is probably going to resonate with all the other information you have gotten from other sources. And that's okay. You know, as long as you can feel, as long as you can grasp the meaning of it in one way or another, I think we're in good course. So to begin, I'm going to give you the classic metaphors that are used for trying to understand the ego. And the first one that I like a lot because it goes perfectly with our mind and consciousness is the sky. You see, the sky is simply a vast field of space, and that's what we call the sky. Now, the sky can be colored blue, maybe red, orange, or other colors depending on the interaction of the atmosphere. We can have clouds, we can have birds and everything else, but the sky itself seems to color itself from the different reactions and activities of the parts that are within it. But the sky is not made of anything in particular. And so it would be wrong to say that the sky is the cloud or that the cloud is the sky. In the sense of identifying part of the sky as something that is the fundamental identity of it. And so when we say that the clouds pass, it's just like the thoughts and ideas and conceptions of reality pass. They're not permanent. The sky is permanent, yet the things that it contains are part of itself, or it's a modulation of itself. This is a way to see how the infinite space of sky can contain anything, just like your infinite field of consciousness can contain any particular contraction of it that we call mind. And so this, again, it's one way, one angle to get a sense of what we're talking about. Never get caught up with analogies or metaphors. Always try to get the essence of it, and this is what I'm trying to do. Another one that is easier to understand is the ocean, the water, because the ocean creates waves, and the wave itself doesn't really exist. It is a form of the water. The water has taken the form of the wave. And so we can say that although the wave is real and we can see it, we can measure it, we can see its activity, its beginning and its end, it's not really something independent from water. And in the same way, the ego, just like the clouds are not the sky, the wave is not the water, is not particularly the identity of water. Water is simply water. But the activity of water becomes the wave. And so we can see that something is happening. Now you're starting to get the idea here that there is one field of something, there is one particular thing of, say, matter in this case, or something physical visible for us in the metaphor, that is actually the essence of it. And then there is an activity or a clouding of it, and that is what we call the ego. The closest thing that we can use, and I'm trying to use all different ones so you can get the same meaning of the relationship between activity and identity. The same thing happens when a good actor gets into its character and it starts feeling everything. But a good actor also knows how to end the part and return to itself. And this is exactly what is happening as well. The identity with the character that the actor is playing is the problem, is what generates the illusion that you are something else. This is the closest thing we can have to our day-to-day activity when we know that our mind is creating a character. It's creating a form, a wave, a cloud here. And so we are getting used to the form and we get attached to the form. And through that form is that we suffer because we see the form dissipate as the cloud dissipates, or the wave return to its source. It starts to break apart and the character no longer has a pull on the actor. And so this is the return to the self. This is all the realization that we are not that. Of course, the more you identify with a wave, the more you're going to see that you are made out of nothing. And this creates a sort of disturbance in your own field of identity because you know that you're not that. Now, how do we come to this? How do we start becoming something separate? And this is, the ego is also mentioned as the idea of the separate self, the identity of a separate being that is independent from reality. Well, you see, it's all about strengthening patterns. The whole process of us identifying as a separate self or an ego is because the strengthening of patterns. This is all due to the, I should say, the structure of the mind, the way in which we actually behave. The reason why we have, it's almost like the blueprint of this third density reality is that we associate ourselves with specific things. And there's a reason for that I'll get to in the next point. But this strengthening of patterns, you can see it as, for example, your name. My name is Gabriel, and because of that, every time I hear the name Gabriel, I'm going to respond to it because there has been a strengthening of a pattern there that I associate myself with. But when I sit in solitude, or if I were to be alone and nobody called me Gabriel, the name would start being simply a noise, something that I got used to. So therefore, I'm not my name. That's easy to see. And on the opposite side, for example, I've never been associated with the idea that I am a doll, that D-O-L-L, a doll that simply is animated and it's seeking its own expansion into a star. That's not a pattern that I have developed in my mind. But another pattern that I have obviously developed is the identity of my physical body, which is masculine, and it has certain characteristics of certain pigments in my skin and other things. These are patterns that I recognize and that I obviously say, well, I feel like this is me. When I see a picture of myself, I can identify myself and say, this is me, this is not me. And so these strengthening of patterns happen in every single aspect of our lives. It could be from our name, like I said, or from our physical structure, or from the most important, the activities that we do in our mind. This is constantly changing because the activities that we incur into are strengthened by our previous activities, what we have done. And so the patterns get reinforced. And so these reinforcement of patterns sometimes become so ingrained in our psyche that we immediately construct an idea of who we are based on those patterns. But the patterns themselves are like clouds in the sky, or the wave in the ocean, or simply the actor, or rather the character that the actor is playing. They are not real. They are made out of the stuff for sure, and this is what it makes it so fascinating and actually so difficult for us in our third density reality, veiled by the idea that we are separate from the environment, that we are actually something apart from it. And so you can start to see how the activity of the mind is really what's creating the idea of a separate self, the ego, the personality. The word personality comes from persona. In Spanish, we use the word for character is personaje, which means persona or personage, if you want. It's simply an idea. It's a character. It's just something that we play as. We, as children, we would play as characters. Same thing. We are imagining this in our minds. Now, the thing is that over time, because we have strengthened so many patterns in our lives, and forget about the physical structure or the names or the titles, all of that we know that are transient. It's those little parts that we don't believe that are in the same category of the strengthened patterns of our mind's activity. And so that mind activity has been reinforced so long that we continue to believe that I am worthless, I am superior, I am poor, I am wealthy, I am tall, I am short, I am deserving or undeserving. All of these things go into different strata of our minds and our subconscious and start creating these patterns that eventually become toxic to the self, to the beingness. And it's all about association, creating, strengthening these patterns. So that's the other part that is very important to recognize in the ego, or the activity of the mind, which we associate ourselves with. This, of course, doesn't mean that you can disassociate yourself with everything, because this activity of the mind will continue. But what can change is what you associate yourself as an identity of it. And that is the revelation of the one self as it sees the character being played. Now, you may be asking, what is also, the motive? Why do we have to identify ourselves with something? Well, I would argue, and this is my point of view, that if you analyze the essence of reality, the truth of our beingness, what we are is everything. You see, when you go down to the essence of yourself, you realize that you're everything. That means that identity is actually ingrained in our sense of being. And so when you realize this, there is obviously, let's say, a gravity into identity. The whole universe is actually trying to identify itself. It's not only you. Everything that is moving, it's trying to realize what it is. And it's done through experience. And this experience leads to the human state of finding out who we truly are through self-reflection. So it is, I would say, if I can put it into words, it is our true nature to try and identify ourselves. We do this from the beginning. The only question that matters is, who am I? This who am I will bring you to the essence of the whole universe, of anything actually. And so it is built in us. It is actually the stuff, the ocean that is made out of water, the sky that is made out of space, and the character, or rather the actor, that is made out of consciousness and infinite possibilities, infinite characters that it can create, is identity, is knowing. And so the knowing of the self is really the expansion of the one consciousness that exists. So we can say that this is just simply a part of us. It's not even a part of us, it's our essence, it's what we're made of. And so this is why we're always trying to identify. Now, because we do live in a veiled reality, in a dimension that is veiled from its own source, unlike other beings who do not live in our current density of consciousness, we will try to attach to anything that we believe we are. And so this is the beauty of this illusion of reality, that we will try to attach to anything that we can feel, we can identify, whether that be a body, a specific state of mind, or any activity that we perform or that we feel associated with. This is why, in general, you can see that the views of trying to control people, which is the negative use of the self, of reinforcing the separate self always wants to control. And the way to control is to divide. We know it, divide and conquer. So the idea to divide is to create identities, to always say that you're separate from each other by means of group, tribe, nations, boundaries, race, ethnicity, or what have you. Any sort of label that we can slap on somebody is going to create that. First of all, it is our true nature to want to label ourselves, to want to identify ourselves. And so the separate self will always use that as a means to control others because it knows it itself. This is the illusion that is created here. And so the last question that we may be asking is, why? Why do we have to create this reality? Why do we have to create so much illusion when all we want to know is who we are in our true essence? And here's where it gets really interesting to me. In the way I can just smile and say, I wouldn't have it other way. Simply because, you see, if you see that we are what we are, because we cannot recognize who we truly are in our essence, then you start to see the beauty of the multiplicity of personalities that can develop. The biggest drama in the universe is that part of itself that gets lost in its own imagination. The imagination of the one consciousness is to try and explore, apart from the knowing of itself, what it can be. And so if you could imagine any possible dream that is the best, you will always try to find that which is going to surprise you, because in the end, all you need to do is wake up. And waking up, whether in this reality or in another reality, when you die or while you're incarnated, it's all up to us. And that waking up is simply the dissolving of that idea that we are an ego. So the biggest drama that we're living in planet Earth and in any other part of the galaxy or the universe itself, it's simply the desire of the one consciousness in third density, in the veiled third density reality that we live in, to explore itself at its best and in the most fascinating way, like we do right now. It's incredible to believe or to understand, to see how humans have gotten away from itself and created this fascinating environment. Because in the end, none of it is real. None of it is, in fact, going to affect consciousness. Consciousness is always perceiving it, and you are that. So that's the reason that I believe, and this goes hand in hand with the mythology of the Hindus, who believe that the universe is a dramatic act. It's a play. And consciousness, at its very root, it's playing all of this, and this is the best design it could ever create to explore itself through the multiplicity of things that exist in our environment. You can use this simply to see how our perception of anything, be it separate from us, is just like we are inside a dream. That all of this is a dream and you are the dreamer. It's all of us dreaming this. But there's only one dreamer, and that is our shared being. So I hope this clarifies a little bit more what's the ego from my perspective. Like I said, it's just like love. The ego, just like love, cannot be defined, but can only be talked about. The whole idea, and my hope, is that this helps to stimulate that recognition of everything that I said. Because it's not about you believing what I say or making sense to you in an intellectual way, but you feeling it. You actually feeling it inside you and saying, yes, I know, I am not that. I am everything. So with that, I come to the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. As usual, If you find it valuable, please like, subscribe, share it. Share it with somebody who is very confused with the ego and doesn't know how to see it or how to understand it. I thank you again, and I'll see you in the next video.